So this is Bone Dry Retro, a channel that will discuss video games from the beginning in a lot of ways. I experienced all the different console generations at the outset and played, I want to say, almost every console ever released. And I mean that by major releases and some minor releases, but mainly major releases. I have feelings about all of them. And I just want to say that those are my opinions and not based on any real facts other than my nostalgia for things. And I'll outline when I'm being nostalgic, and I'll outline when I'm sort of quoting the consensus, although I understand the consensus is also debatable. And that's what I want. I want a debate. And this topic will be my feelings on the top 5 hockey console games to ever be released. I'm not going to count PC as a console for this. For a variety of reasons, because a PC lagged a little bit behind with controls for a while. I thought there's some great games out there, even ones that could contend with the greatest of all time. But I think we need to differentiate between console and PC on this particular debate, so to speak. We need to remove that, and just keep in mind these are my opinions, nothing more. So when we have a debate going on about games, a lot of it's personal, and a lot of it deals with our own experience. So a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be based on that. I can't say that everybody can agree with me or disagree with me. I can't say that everybody should agree with me or disagree with me. I don't think that's fair. I think the most important thing is to have a reason for why we think what we think. And when there are times that I'm going to talk about something that I like for a personal reason, I will state that it's a personal reason. There are times when I'll talk about the general consensus on things. And even that, of course, can be pushed to the side because personal experience trumps that every time. To say that the extreme games that came out in the late 90s and early 2000s, I think it was Extreme Bike Racing or Extreme whatever, they were the worst games I ever reviewed. So for somebody to say that's a great game, or Postal 2, which was a violent game just for violence sake, I think maybe we can make some generalizations there. Someone saying Metal Gear Solid is a bad game is a personal opinion that doesn't stand up against all the media pretty much, and just about every PlayStation owner at the time would at least give a nod to the fact that they played it. It was good. You want to say it's great? I think most people would agree with you. But you want to say it just absolutely sucks? You're probably being contrary. And I'll try to avoid that as much as possible. But personal opinion to me is the most important thing. So if you disagree with me, that's great. I'm doing these things really to get a conversation going, but an open one. So I might sound like I'm very opinionated about something and I'm passionate about it. That's what you're going to hear. But I'm fully aware of the fact that I can't be wrong, even though my wife might think otherwise. I do know that I can be wrong. So let's start with 5 great games, hockey games, and I'll rank them from 5th to 1st. My first is a personal one because it's what I owned at the time. And you might be able to swap this out for a contemporary game on a console that I didn't own. Well, I did play the hockey on Atari 2600. I'm probably calling it the 2600, by the way. I know it's supposed to be called, but we just call it Atari. And that sticks with me. But either way, I'm talking about in television hockey, video hockey for the first time that we experienced, my generation experienced. So we got a lot of fun out of it. The graphics, you could see what the players were doing for the first time with some realism instead of the puck darting all over the place. There was a general sense of skating that just seems to be a little better. I'm putting this at number 5 because of nostalgia for me. Of course I am. But I would put it up against anything else from that era and even maybe a little after. And I think it holds up. Does it hold up against Blades of Steel? No, that's the next one coming up. It doesn't. But you could see where it influenced it. Now, again, we played some of these games in the arcade, and the Intellivision was the first one that made that feel like it came home. And then number 4 is Blades of Steel on the NES, which is regarded as a very good game. in my research, I found that people do put this in their top tens. Some put it in their top five. What I didn't want to do here is I didn't want to make this technologically based, because if I did that, then any game pretty much after 94, which could get a nod for all its achievements and advancements, that it was the most advanced for its time. After that, nothing until 2010 is going to make the list, and probably not until 2016. And then 2018 will win, 2022. And Oscar's here, by the way. He'll be on camera from time to time. That's my dog. So if you see me look down every once in a while, I'm just checking in on him to make sure he's okay. A lot of these videos will be recorded when I'm home alone with him, and he needs to be watched every once in a while. That's all. But I'll put him on screen. But anyway, Blades of Steel. Action. Arcade style. Good graphics, as you'll see in the sample here. Very good sound, in my opinion. Playability was good, considering you're using two-button controller with a D-pad. Controls are pretty good. Gives you a good sense of hockey in a lot of ways. So Blades of Steel sound, I thought, was excellent. The control was good. Edit this, obviously. Blades of Steel had good action, good fun, play with somebody one-on-one. One of the first games that I really played a lot with friends, coming over and just hammer it out on the NES. So maybe again a little nostalgia there, though I think a lot of people will agree with me on that one. Maybe they would put it number 4. I guess your nostalgia will dictate that. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3. In the comments, let me know. Curious to see what other people think about that. Again, my opinion, nobody else's. The next one might be a little controversial. It's based a little bit on my experience, but understand one thing. Once I was in charge of purchasing consoles as opposed to them being bought for me as a kid, I owned every console of the generation at one point or another. So although I might have leaned, let's say, towards Sega, so when I say that something was better on an inferior console, some people think it is, I say it because I saw things to make me feel that way. And I played the other games. So NHL 98 on the Saturn is my number 3. And that's mainly because playability, I think the multimedia intro, which you'll see on the screen, was excellent. It was the first one to really bring this home. The other consoles did it a little bit later, but I'm going to give the nod to the Saturn. Also, for hockey, and this comes from the Genesis really being at the forefront of the EA Sports just movement. That's what it was. It was an EA Sports movement. There were sports games before, and then EA Sports got their shit together, let's say in 92. No, even 91, not in 92. Great game. And the hockey games were phenomenal, but to play hockey with the Saturn controller, which was a throwback to the Dreamcast controller, you look at the two of them, they're very similar in how they sit in your hand. Forget about the fact that the D-pad on the Saturn was not as good. It wasn't. But still, it just seemed more natural to play that 6-button configuration than the 4-button one on the PlayStation. And Nintendo, although I love the Nintendo 64, by the way, one of my favorite consoles of all time, did not like playing sports games on it at all. Minus NFL Blitz, because that was an arcade game with a few buttons and it worked. But 98, NHL 98 on the Sega Genesis, the sound, this is when we get CD sound. If the 3DO could have had an NHL game on it, I think we would have seen some amazing things beforehand. Like the Madden 3D revolution really doesn't happen until after NFL Game Day on the PlayStation. And we're talking 96, 97. If the 3DO in 94, let's say, could have come up with a hockey game on top of their football game, we would have a hockey game at list here, right? From 3DO. I really believe so. I might give that the nod, but instead I have to give the Saturn the nod because it did what the 3DO could have done. It did it sooner. And the models on the Sega Saturn for this, the character models, the animations are so far ahead of anything that came before. 97 on the Genesis is decent, but I give the nod to 98 because they refined everything, particularly gameplay. They brought it into the 3D world, but they made it feel like Hockey 94. That movement, that speed, the one-timers. It finally felt like those little characters we've been watching on the screen since 1992 in the original NHL hockey, and then they slowly changed them over time to, let's say, Hockey 97 or 96 on, let's say, the Super Nintendo, where they're more animated, they look better, there's different animations, they start to get a little bit of an identity. Each player has their own almost identity at that point, not fully, but it's getting there. I mean, that all happens, but to bring that now into the 3D stage and to bring it with the animations, I think is what really made Hockey 98 work. And again, the sound was the CD sound for the first time. You had the capability of CD sound with the 3DO, but 3DO just did not take off for one very simple reason, and that is money. And unfortunately, they didn't learn the lesson of money. Manufacturers and businesses and corporations need to understand the economies of their businesses, and unfortunately, 3DO did not. Genius running it, genius idea, terrible implementation. But that's, again, for another video. I'll be happy to do one on the 3DO, one of my favorite failed consoles. Fine. Without further ado, let's get to number 2, which again might be a little controversial. It is NHL 2016. I'm going to give the nod to the Xbox One on this one, only because I played the PlayStation 4 version, and although good, and probably just as good, giving the nod to the controller. I just think that for sports, for the most part, hockey particularly, I like the Xbox controller. Madden, I think I'd go either way, and maybe in some ways I'd lean more towards the PlayStation because I played against all my friends on PlayStations, Madden and game games. So, okay. When it came to hockey, hockey was really more Saturn than Xbox. So, and Dreamcast, but none of the Dreamcast games made it. I'll have an honorable mention afterwards for that. But 2016 is what brought player animations far. It really just shows how far games have come. Everything that's happened after 2016, for the most part, have been gameplay modifications, enhanced graphics with the better consoles that come out. But the format's still the same. And if I showed you 2016, I showed you 2020, unless you're a student of these games, you can't tell the difference that much. If I told you, if I showed you on a 720p TV, 2020 or 2023 even, so we keep the resolution the same, you might not see a big difference. This one brings in the more lifelike player models, the accurate physics. The controls are smooth at this point. Again, this is when they started with the right stick moves and the deeks, which they had, but they really started to perfect. 2016 is, I think, when they really did that. And I've had all the other years, before and after. Let's say not every. I might miss one or two, but I have had EA Play for a long time, and I get all of them. So I played 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And they're all great, but I always go back to 2016. There's just something about 2016. The presentation style is great. The play-by-play is great. Again, the animations are spectacular, but it's really all about the play. And for me, this one is the smoothest. On an Xbox One X, for instance, it plays super fast, super smooth. It's like butter. And the controls just work. I mean, I was a big fan of the Xbox 360 controller, but when the Xbox One came out, it was almost like they got it right. They nailed it. So if you haven't figured that out yet, I'm controller-based in a lot of ways. I think a lot of players are. I think our fondness of games comes from a lot of different things. One of them is what we have, and then the other is what feels good. To me, the Xbox controller feels good. If you want to say 2016 on the PS4 is better, I'm not going to dispute that. But I think that year is the better year out of the last 5, let's say 6. So that's my take on that. And if you haven't figured it out, number 1, and probably always will be number 1, is NHL 94. And let me take you back a little bit, give you a little history. The original hockey game from EA was just called NHL Hockey. And don't let me tell you, go listen to Sega Lord X or Classic Gaming Quarterly or any channel you choose that does retro games. And they've done a bit on the NHL series and what was going on. They were having trouble getting licensing. So they would have the player licensing one year and not the NHL licensing the other. And it came down a lot, believe it or not, to fight. They didn't want the fighting in the game. So there was a battle back and forth, and it all came together in 94. What happened in 94 was they dropped the fighting. And that's what makes 94 everybody's favorite, perhaps. But it's also sometimes given more credit than it's due. I'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about what's great about it. What's great about it is the one-timer. That's it. That's what sets it apart. The animations, the graphics, the gameplay all get tweaked just enough that you can tell the difference between Hockey 93 and 94. There's no doubt that you can feel that difference. But the other difference is the one-timer. And that makes it more realistic hockey. It's not realistic hockey. It can't be realistic hockey. It's top-down, little guys on the screen. So you don't get that same feel. They do the skating a little bit different in 94, and you can feel that. They change it a lot more in 95. And that's why 95 polarizes a lot of people. That's why 95 didn't make this list, because I did not like the change to try and make it more like real feel skating. Where if you've ever played ice hockey, and I have, there's a certain glide to it. There's a certain way that you switch from going forward to backward. And it's not just a push up or push down of a joystick. You've got to maneuver it. And on a D-pad, that's really tough to do. Analog stick, you can do it. And that's why I had a problem with 95. 95 changed that a lot. Friends didn't like it either. As a matter of fact, my friend bought 95 and come up to my house to play 94. Had no interest in playing 95. Which is a shame, because it's actually a good game in retrospect. Now that I've been trained on the modern games with skating dynamics, it makes it a little bit easier to play to go back and play 95. But 94 was the one that really brought it all together. It was accessible. Anybody could pick it up and play it. I would have friends come over that never played a hockey game before, and within 25 minutes, we're battling it out. I'm still winning because I played more, but they're competitive. You know, you're not blowing them out 25-1. Maybe you do that in the first game. But after that, it's a difficult enough game with the assist on the goalies, too. If you don't control your goalies, an average to below average player can still compete, and that's what makes it accessible. Has all the players, all the teams, the ratings are good. Gretzky is awesome in it. Even if you hate Gretzky, the man is a legend, and he plays like a legend in that. He's like Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl, just nearly unbeatable. But Brett Hull is great in this game. The Red Wings in general, this game made me a Red Wings fan from just playing as one of my friends liked Chicago, so I chose Detroit. Because I'm an Islander fan by default, and they were not very good at this point. So I chose the Red Wings. They were one of the best teams in the game, and I've been a Red Wings fan almost ever since. So part of the reason why this game makes it is because I'm a Red Wings fan, because of the game. It made me enjoy hockey more, believe it or not. And I understood all the players. I knew all the players in the league. I had been a fan of hockey when I was younger, and it kind of faded a little bit as I got older. And then sort of a renaissance. Hockey 93 is what started it. 94 is what really brought it out. And I played Hockey 94 until I bought Hockey 98 for Genesis. My friend had 95. We played that once in a while. I had 96, but I didn't play it as much. There's something about just even the intro in 96 isn't as good. The intro in 94, Mark Lesser, just that blue logo, just does it for me. I know he's involved in the other games, but it just didn't have the same feel to it. Even that music that you'll hear makes it for me. Now, let's go back and look at our honorable mention. And I'm going to give the NHL 2K series on the Dreamcast an honorable mention. And I'm doing this because I played them a lot. I played the other games at the time. I played them against each other. I played the NHL series versus the 2K series. And for the most part, EA had it better. But when I was reviewing games at this point, one of my common laments about Electronic Arts was they were starting to gain a stranglehold on just the sports genre. And because of that, they had very little competition. Particularly Madden was my biggest problem. I love Madden, don't get me wrong, but they had very little reason to push the envelope until PlayStation comes out and Game Day comes out and cleans their clock. They had to delay a Madden release because they saw what Game Day looked like. They were just going to try and churn out the same old garbage. But Game Day didn't last. So when we come to the Dreamcast, we come to PlayStation 2 time, they've got a stranglehold again. Microsoft tries with the NFL Fever. They do the best they can with that. And it's a decent game. Again, didn't know about. But Sega had a problem. EA was not going to make games for the Dreamcast. They weren't going to make their sports games for the Dreamcast. So they were on their own. So instead of getting Triple Play, which became MVP, which disappeared because of licensing, instead of Madden, instead of NHL, they created their own 2K series in football. Everybody knows 2K5 considered one of the best games ever, but the hockey gets overlooked. And one of the last games, if not the last game in North America released for the Dreamcast was NHL 2K2. And I've gone back and played this recently. It's 20 plus years old now, and it holds up. It's good. It's not great. It's not top 5. It just makes top 5, I think. The whole series, the series as a whole, I will give honorable mention. I'm not going to say it's number 6. Again, because almost any entry in the EA series beats it because, for the most part, it's got polish. And that's, in 2K2, you saw the possibilities of what they could have done with the hockey series if they had a couple more years. You saw what they did with the football. For some reason, it didn't continue as well with the hockey on the Xbox and on the PlayStation 2. But 2K5 for the PlayStation 2, possibly the best football game ever made. And we can debate that another time too. But the 2K series in hockey on the Dreamcast. Dreamcast controller, again, worked very well. For sports, worked very well for hockey. It had a very natural feel to it. So good of a feel, I think that's what inspired the Xbox original controller that some people hated and now everybody loves. The fact they're making a modern version of the Duke controller now tells you all you need to know about how good that controller probably was. It's amazing what we end up liking after the fact. But Dreamcast, unfortunately, was a doomed console. So was sports games on that console, unfortunately, but we'll get that. And so that's my top 5 with the honorable mention. Again, really my perspective, what I think about the games and how I experience them, and not so much this game's better than that game or a game that you like. It doesn't make my list. It shouldn't make my list. Your favorite game should make your list, and then we compare our lists. If we were going to make a global list, then we can debate this, and I would love to. So in the comments, please feel free to tell me what you agree with and what you disagree with. Again, pardon the not so great background right now. I'm working on getting the game cave together, but I want to get my videos started. And the only way to start them is to record them and then edit them. And I know it's a lot of work. And I know I've got a lot to do in post. So that should be interesting. I won't be using the video technology I'm using now. I have a nice camera set up, everything else. So criticisms on that, you can hold off on a little bit. I mean, feel free to criticize if you want, but I want to be more about content anyway, and the thrills will come as I acquire the tools necessary and set up these tools in a place that has good sound, because that's been the problem. It's locating a place that is not interrupted, number one. It doesn't have a lot of background. It's like my computer fan's been bothering me. I don't think it's coming through on the recording, but it might. So again, I've been in games for all my life. My family ran an arcade when I was a kid, so I saw all the games as they came out. I saw the video game revolution at a very young age, but I saw the video game revolution turn into video game generation. mentioned the golden age, so to speak, and the crash and all that. And I want to talk about all that stuff. I want to talk about it from my perspective. That is just a perspective. It will align a lot, perhaps, with what common knowledge is, but I also want to clearly state that a lot of people look back at those times either through rose-colored glasses or through a pinhole camera instead of wider view. My side of the street was the Intellivision side of the street. Across the street was the Atari side of the street. And we would play with each other. I would go and play Atari. They would come and play Intellivision. But we were in a television house, and my neighbors would come and play, and the television fans would come and play, and then the Atari fans would come and play. And we debated, of course, too, which Asteroids versus Astro Smash. Love to hear what people think about that one. And I might do a video on that too. But let me know what you want to hear about. Got a lot of opinions. And again, that's just what they are, is opinions. And I want them to be tested, and I want them to be argued against. That's what makes it fun. So feel free, reach out any way you want. This is Bone Dry Retro's first episode. Signing